Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anna Stanford. I'm Communications Lead at Powerful Women, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our third Spotlight webinar. Our Spotlight series was launched this year to shine a light on women who are having an impact in the UK energy sector, and we've got a really great one today. In a second, I will pass over to today's webinar chair, who I'm delighted to say is Duncan Clark, Head of UK Region at Ørsted, and he's also a member of our Energy Leaders Coalition. But before that, just a couple of housekeeping points. The webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded onto Powerful Women's YouTube channel, so please do share it with colleagues once it's out. And we'll have time for Q&A in the second half. So if you want to ask a question, please do put that in the Q&A as we go along, and I'll be back to ask the questions. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I hope you will enjoy it too, and I will now pass over to Duncan.
Thank you, Anna, and hello everybody. I'm delighted to be introducing today Ruth Herbert, the Chief Executive of the Carbon Capture and Storage Association. I'm here on behalf of the Energy Leaders Coalition. That's a group of leaders of energy companies working here in the UK. We come together in support of powerful women, in support of that aim of 40% female in leadership and middle management positions by 2030 in our industry. We challenge each other, we support each other, we share best practice and the barriers that we're trying to tackle in our organisations. And this year, our theme is engaging the majority or spotlighting the minority, and that's what we're here today for. And Ruth Herbert has had a double-decade career in the public sector. She's worked for the government in the Department of Energy and Climate Change. She's worked for the Low Carbon Contracts Company, and for the last 3 years she's worked here at the Carbon Capture and Storage Association. Ruth, perhaps place to start, could you just maybe give us an overview of your career to date and maybe pick out a highlight for us?
Yeah, so I started on the civil service fast stream and got to work in different places in Whitehall, including a bit of a stint in the Treasury and the City of London Corporation, before kind of settling really in the energy department. It changed names so many times, so I won't go over that, but travelling without moving perhaps. But I would say the highlights really are that stick in your mind sometimes are those big events where everyone comes together. And when I was working on carbon capture and storage policy early on in the late 2000s, it was the International Ministerial Conference of the Carbon Sequestration Leadership Forum, which we hosted at the Landmark Hotel in London. And Ed Miliband, who was Secretary of State at the time, was chairing the meeting with Stephen Chu, the US Energy Secretary, and 15 Secretaries of State from around the world. And it really did feel like globally we were going to do CCS, and UK was at the forefront, and it was really, really exciting with our Norwegian co-hosts as well, who were also, have been doing CCS for
an
10
inspiring
years.
event,
So,
top political sponsorship,
huge expo
international.
Industry, yeah, fantastic.
You must have been inspired.
I really was, and I knew we needed to do it, and I knew we kind of had 10 years to really deploy a significant level of CCS, and all of our targets were around 2020 deployment. And then another sort of moment springs to mind really, which was last year at the CCSA's annual conference in October with 800 people. Not as big industry expo, but a lot of industry there, and a huge amount of engagement from government, industry and other sectors. And it really was, it felt like the industry was as big then as it had been 10 years ago. So we lost 10 years in the middle, but it felt like, we're back to where we need to be if we're going to deploy this globally. And then in the middle of all of that, of course, electricity market reform. I spent 10 years doing that, which was fantastic, an amazing team, and the implementation coordination meetings actually stick in my mind from that. 60 industry round a table, all different parts of the industry, retail, wholesale, developers, all looking at the detailed codes and making sure that this was going to work and it wasn't going to cause an investment hiatus.
Such an important part of our industry. If you think of what you've done, you described it as the bit in the middle where carbon capture went down a bit of a side road, but it was absolutely huge.
Transformational when you think about what happened to renewables. There were 5% of our electricity mix, and like half. So it was amazing. And in fact, the biggest lesson for that really was that EMR, it delivered very, very quickly on its objectives and soon needed to evolve itself.
Needs to run on.
The 4 stages of EMR that Jonathan Briley and I discussed and mapped out and put in the white paper, we were on stage 2 before we'd caught our breath. So I think that was, fantastic group of people.
So like a lot of public sector careers, it seems to me, you've moved around, you were accumulating knowledge and skills in different areas with an energy theme, always with an energy theme?
Well, I did financial sector strategy, so financial services strategy in the Treasury, and I thought I would stay in that area, to be honest, but I'd always been interested in energy and climate change since degree, so I think I wanted to get into the energy sector. But I was at the Treasury when Northern Rock happened, so that was quite an eye-opener, just to see that department suddenly overnight. Some people didn't go home, the financial stability team next to us had to work the weekend, then our team got halved, and half went to work with them, and the rest of us had to cover the waterfront. That was just to see how dynamic the civil service, the public sector can be when there's a crisis, and we saw it in COVID, and lots of my ex-colleagues worked through COVID in a similar way. So I think just impressive, really, what civil servants can do. I've got very high, very good regard for and high sort of respect for them.
You've just described 4 really, if you like, inspiring moments in your career, but definitely after one of those, there was a low. Because you'd invested all this time and of yourself in it, and then it wasn't going anywhere.
No.
What happened then? What did you think?
That was really tough. We went to the pub and sort of recounted all our tales of the programme. So what we're talking about is the cancellation of what we call Demo 1, but it was the first CCS demonstration programme, basically government-funded programme. And it was weeks away from contracts being signed, and it was cancelled, change of administration, and it really was devastating, I think, for everyone. I know it was from the industry side, but within government, the civil servants. And I think you sort of feel, what is the point? We've thrown our hearts and minds into this. We've worked long hours, and it's not going to happen. And we're throwing away that leadership, and it really was a sad time. But you have to pick yourself up, because that's just one part of the transition. There was an opportunity, to do other things in the transition, and I think my view was, okay, I didn't really see where that was going at the time, but I thought, look, let's just get some different experience. So I've always sort of gone, well, let's go different at each juncture to try to change something up. And I thought, legislation, I need experience of that. Haven't got that, let's go to that box. So I went to work for the Bill team, and through that's how I got into electricity market reform.
So I heard 2 sides to that. One was the personal picking yourself up, because you've invested so much in something and it's now not really going where everyone thought it was. And the other bit was a sort of an element of curating your career. So in your case, it was something new, something different, accumulate a bit more knowledge in an adjacent but different area.
Yeah, exactly.
And along the way, were you taking advice from mentors or a mentor?
Yes, I think there were lots of people that I looked up to and talked to within my career that whether it was managers that were particularly good, or sometimes also like someone a bit further off, like a DG or a director, just to talk to.
And that, just for people who are not civil servants, that's very senior in the civil service. That's somebody very successful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But I would always, if there was a chance, because occasionally they would desk walk in the old days, so we have to find different ways to do it now, and we'll talk about that. But when they come over and ask how it's going, try to get a bit of conversation going and try to get, talk a little bit about what you enjoy and what you not, what you want to do next, because they'll keep you in mind. And also, I think you have to state what you want. I had a really good mentor, Martin Reed, in Low Carbon Contracts Company, so a bit later on, who said to me, well, what do you want? Just tell me what you want. Do you want to run things, or are you really interested in policy detail, or what is it? And it was really kind of a bit of an affront. It's quite direct. And I had to really go away and think.
So you had to work it out, what it was you really wanted?
I'm not actually sure. I think that I'm really into what I'm doing on policy, but clearly I've been stepping up and putting my hand up a lot to take myself out of that policy comfort zone and say, do the all-staff meeting or do something else for the CEO when he was away. So that, for me, I had a supportive CEO was willing to delegate stuff. That really helped me to start to hone wider leadership skills. And I think you've got to put your hand up and put yourself forward.
So there's two parts to that, isn't there? One is being clear with yourself, working out with yourself what it is.
Yeah.
And then I think the second bit, this totally resonates with me, is to actually project it.
Yes.
Because no one's going to project it for you, and no one's going to create a vacuum and suck you into it. You're going to have to sort of talk about it, even if that's not the first thing you think of doing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Be your own PR machine.
Be your own PR machine.
It can be difficult at first. You've got to really look at yourself objectively and also think, well, where are my gaps and where do I need more experience?
And that period you were describing then in the Low Carbon Contracts Company, where you were saying, well, I'll take that all employees meeting. Talking earlier, you were saying to me that felt almost like you were then at a stage where you could get your head around, well, what's involved in being maybe the leader, the CEO type thing.
Yeah.
So do you think that was? I mean, no one ever gives you a playbook, do they?
No.
You have to pick it up. So.
Yes.
Was that important in making the jump? Because from the LCCC, you made that jump to the chief executive of the Carbon Capture and Storage Association. How did that happen?
And to be fair, when I started at LCCC, I was just Low Carbon Contracts Company. I was just on secondment from civil service. I was helping them set up.
Yeah.
So, the fact that I then became part of the leadership team, I think that just, but I was the only civil servant there, and I had to learn a different way of operating as much as I had to explain to them how to work with the government. I think I would say there was, there's an ability to, you can put your hand up and put yourself forward and put yourself out of your comfort zone to do things in those roles, or you can just deliver what's on your plate. And I think I've always been the one to put my hand up and offer to do more. Having said that, there were some periods during my career where it was difficult and I couldn't do that as much when I had young children and so forth. And so one of the things I realised is that actually you do have to set aside a little bit of time to promote yourself and what you are doing, and also to sort of invest in that career growth element. And it's okay to do that. And the sort of, I must admit that I have been, potentially I accuse myself of having been a perfectionist at times during my career and trying to always juggle everything, get everything done 100%.
I think there's so much insight in here. That thing, it is okay to set aside a bit of your professional time to self-promote.
Yeah.
I honestly think that's such a powerful lesson, especially if you are the sort of person who would naturally be, focused on delivery and that can consume you, and sometimes you're neglecting a really important part of your professional side. Yeah.
Exactly, and especially when you have young children, if you ever do, but you are trying to run, you're trying to do something completely different in your personal life at the same time as something, whatever it is, doesn't have to be children, but if you've got a lot going on in your personal life, a lot going on in your work life, maybe you can't do evenings, you can't go out and do that in the evenings at events. So you've got to
our industry has a lot of those events.
Yeah, it does. Partly, and we talk maybe later about how we can change that, but you have to find time during the working day to do that stuff, and make most of it.
Yeah.
Where you find it.
Yeah. Any regrets? Any moments in your career you look back now and you think, I did that wrong? Or
yeah, I mean, I would say I think everything's a learning curve, so I wouldn't talk about mistakes or being wrong, but I do regret a bit earlier on in the civil service, there was an opportunity to go for a deputy director role, and I was really excited by it, but I was pregnant, and I decided when I read the spec, because the big strategy for number 10 was going to be needing to be delivered 1 month after my due date, that it was not fair or right for me to apply for that role. Because how could I, be able to deliver it properly? And I did regret that later, because I did realise that I probably could have set that process up and built the team and had it on track.
And had a really big impact. And had a really big impact.
And had a good deputy to take it over from me, which we should also talk about. So I realised that I could have done it, and sort of was annoyed that I didn't. But being at a slightly lower level, I was able to move around more and learn more at that level. So again, I don't think there are any mistakes.
Yeah.
If you think the opportunity is right for you, you should go for it, whatever, and have that confidence that you will be able to manage any circumstances around that. But also, it's okay to stay at a more middle management level for longer and learn different things as well. So it's easier to move around and learn more at more junior levels, and the moves are harder to orchestrate as you get more senior.
That totally resonates, and I know enough about the way you work now to know that you will put thought and attention into cultivating and developing leadership in your team. Definitely. Can you just say something about that? How do you do that?
So I think for me, I'm lucky here that I have a small team, so it's just over 20 people. They are in 2 locations, in London and Brussels, but I have the ability to know everybody and everyone's career paths. But even if I don't, I think for the people that I directly manage, really investing in the whole person in terms of understanding why did they want to work here. It starts before interview, and it goes all the way through their journey with you, and to see it as a journey together. At some point, one of you may go off, or one go off that way. You may work together again in the future, but to see their time in your team as part of their life journey, rather than just seeing it through the lens of the work that you're doing together at that time, I think that's really helpful, and getting them to see it that way as well. What can I learn, gain while I'm here that will help me where I want to go next? Yeah. And to be always having that conversation, and to not be afraid of having that conversation even in the first year of someone's employment, because you're not suggesting they're going to leave you straight away.
Yeah.
But it's just making a safe space for people to have that conversation. Then when you do, then you can be always sort of giving those opportunities, rather than it being a kind of hurried thing. In an end of year review, we've got to put enough development objectives, which used to make me laugh in the civil service. Oh, we've run out of time, someone's got the room, and we haven't done the development objectives.
The process takes over, doesn't it? But I picked up earlier that actually you had learned from some of your own experiences. You talked about it earlier, juggling the in-work time,
delegate, exactly.
Both delegation and also, yourself becoming much more efficient and better at doing things as a response to that pressure. But I picked up earlier that you were also taking some practical steps to help people in your team manage through the same kind of challenging periods.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, in particular, constant prioritisation is really, really important. And making clear to people, I mean, it's not necessarily 80-20, but the idea that, you need to get the majority of the work done to a reasonable standard on time, and that's really, really important, and you should take other time to make sure you develop yourself, make sure you network and you're visible, just making sure people have the time for that. and also creating opportunities for them within the working day or within the hours if they're flexible. We've got a lot of flexible workers here, including my successor, who is our current UK director. And just making sure, if people can't do evenings, let's create events during the day. Our receptions are during the day in Parliament, things like that. So we do create those as an association, but making sure they finish at a reasonable time and people can get away if they have commitments.
But I'm going to make sure that I take that back into the ELC, because I think that's a real tip as employers and colleagues, just to make sure that is the way we work.
But also, if we are going to go away on a retreat or do something in an evening, just make sure people have sufficient notice. If they have enough time, they can make arrangements, caring or whatever, and they can be there. And making sure they're going to have an opportunity to showcase their work makes it, if they don't often get that, makes it even more appealing. So I think we can all do that though. And even if you're not the CEO or the manager, you can still say, oh, I'm going to arrange a lunchtime. Bring your lunch along and I'll tell you about what I'm doing. You can set that up anytime, book a meeting room. If you've got the opportunity to do that. So at all levels, we can try to change that culture a little bit.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because I think when we're at our best, our companies tend to do this, but quite often we're not. And it's a phase where things are a bit too rushed, a bit like that PDD discussion you just mentioned, and that's when it falls apart. So it's being at that better performance for more of the time. Any barriers that you felt you came up against that you think might be particular to energy, or maybe it's not particularly to energy?
Yeah, and I think there's I would call it more of a risk, is groupthink. There is definitely a risk. And I would say, even when hiring people, this could creep in. And this is something that I think is important. In the same way that I think you should take risks when you go for new jobs and try to sort of take yourself out of your comfort zone so you'll learn more. I also think that when you're trying to build a team, you should take some risk. You should include candidates who look quite different. Sometimes people call them wildcard candidates, but that perhaps is a bit of a misnomer, but include some candidates that make you think, you're not quite sure, but there's something there you want to explore, and then take a risk when recruiting, because it's not always the obvious candidate is the best candidate. Sometimes they are on paper, but thinking about the culture of the team, and are a lot of us in that same mould? Should we get, and it'd be easy because we get on really well and we talk the same language, and we would all agree on everything really quickly, and that would make the business go quickly. So you think in your head, oh, that's an advantage. Without trying to think like that, you just do. And then you think, oh, this person, we had quite a dynamic discussion, it was a bit difficult, but they made some really good points and really challenged us. You take that person and it's going to be a bit more disruptive and a bit more challenging. But you should take that person.
Yeah, this really speaks.
And if you really challenge yourself deep down, you should take that person, and you should accept some disruption because it's going to make for a better team. And that is really tough. And I've taken a few of those kind of decisions, and I don't think it's ever been wrong. It's definitely had some disruption, and there's been, sometimes you get other people in your team that say, well, they're not really like us, or they're a bit difficult to get on with, or they won't come to the pub for a drink, or I find they're always a bit negative. I say, we brought them in to do this because we're not doing this very well. So get behind what they're doing. Doesn't matter if they come for a drink after work or not. They're here to do a job. And you have to, I think, it's quite, it is hard, but that's our role if we want diverse teams.
You're really speaking to, I think, that underlying value of the disruptive, diversity as disruption, innovation, shining a light on ourselves in a great way.
Exactly.
In a great way. And I think that is answering one of the questions we've got here to talk about, which is how do we intentionally build a more diverse workforce? I think that's some of the practical day-to-day ways of living it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Ruth. That was so interesting. I think we are about at the time to go to some questions. actually, I can see on the chat to extend it.
Oh, okay. No, fine. Perfect.
They said the conversation's going well and we should continue.
Okay.
Which is excellent. I think this is difficult, but have you found yourself, without sort of embarrassing anybody, experiencing poor leadership, something which might have taught you a lesson because it was not a good example to follow, but something that was difficult?
Yeah, I've been in a meeting before where there is an issue, quite an obvious issue going into the meeting that's dividing people, quite a serious, obvious issue that's dividing some people, and the chair of the meeting has decided not to explore it. And to try to deal with it outside of the meeting, and has said to people, we're not going to discuss this together, we're going to deal with it in a different way, and so forth. And I personally, I'm a bit of a wearing heart on your sleeve person. I found that really difficult. I'm really good at poker face. I do media interviews, that's fine. But I think when you're with your team, you should be able to you have to get things
out there.
You have to.
Do you think it was a sort of British Reserve thing, not doing it in the group?
It happens quite a lot. I think it does happen quite a lot in Whitehall, just because you have to have the right people at the table to resolve something, and if they're not, then you're not going to resolve it, and it's just going to become a negative discussion.
Yeah. But
I've also seen it in other contexts, and I think, sometimes you have to take a call. If we've got the people in the room that are going to be able to resolve something, otherwise there's no point picking at something, picking a scab. But I also think if someone in a meeting is visibly unhappy, or other people are unhappy, and we're all aware, then we have to get that out on the table. So that's something, again, that is part of, I suppose, brave leadership, is actually give someone the floor. Do you want to talk about this? And set enough time aside to do it. But you do have to obviously create safe space for everybody in the workplace. So sometimes, obviously, one person's bugbear that they really want to talk about is difficult for someone else. So it's a constant navigation, isn't it, as to when's the right time to discuss an issue.
Yeah.
But if you observe something that's getting in the way of doing the job, I think you need to resolve that first.
And I had a question from one of my colleagues in Ørsted earlier on, who'd picked up your career in public sector and was asking the question, well, is it different in the public sector from in the energy companies themselves in terms of this gender question? Do you think there's something? Because my observation is the public sector and the regulators do a bit better than us as companies in terms of our gender balance in management.
Yeah, I think it's probably down to there being more flexible working. I mean, I clearly had flexible working. I had condensed hours when I was sort of middle management of civil service, and that was a godsend. I don't think I could have done it otherwise. And I do feel like I think what there is, certainly in the civil service, possibly the wider public sector, and possibly also a lot of corporations, is there's what I call the lifeblood of successful organisations, which is this middle management layer, which are high achieving, multitasking, very well organised, finely choose prioritisers who have teams, sometimes quite big teams, who they manage to inspire, manage. They take down all the missives, if you like, from on high, and push out all the cultural and organisational change stuff, deal with all the sort of feedback from that, whilst keeping everybody dealing with crises, whilst keeping delivery all going tickety-boo, but they're pretty invisible, but they are there. But when those people decide that they want to get into leadership or whatever, I think probably it's the public sector where they recognise those traits and stuff, where they're going to get higher up. But actually I see those people in the corporate sector as well.
Yes.
But maybe they're just not getting the opportunities to go up because perhaps there's not enough deliberation to do that.
The way you describe it, that essential rapidly turning engine in the middle on which everything else depends. It is the most difficult point in your career as well, don't you think?
Absolutely.
You know, the amount of uncertainty you deal with, the workload management, the variety, the fact you're still learning, the fact you're still trying to prove yourself.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and become visible, which is sometimes quite hard.
Yeah.
And we talked about, I think, the nice thing about sort of coming in a senior role is that you get to create your own culture in a team. So I get to come in and I can say, well, I want some really different sorts of people and I want us to be a really open culture, talk about ways of working all the time and resolve things. You don't get that when you're in middle management and sometimes it's hard to take risks when you're recruiting people because you might recruit someone you think is dynamic. But then senior management might say, oh, you've got a bit of a live wire there, or, you know,
I've not seen
that person, they're causing, you know, disruption or something. So, you know, you've got to try to get your seniors on board with who you recruit as well, so it's not entirely your choice. You can't really create your own culture because you can have a small team culture, but you've got cultural diktats coming down from the top. So if you're in a large organisation, that middle layer, it's really, really hard to distinguish yourself as a leader, as someone that can create a team, a culture that's different to that around you and that is more successful, which is normally how you distinguish yourself.
I think that really resonates with me, and I think, you know, it's more than one layer, isn't it? If you're in that middle management stage of your career, you need not only your boss or champion or sponsor to rate you and be working for you, but there's a network up there who are also going to have to support.
Yeah, exactly.
And believe in you.
And you need to get them behind you if you want to take risky decisions.
You do.
So you can do that, but it's harder. So it's just about thinking, well, who can I get as my champions? And actually, what I really liked about being in the low carbon contracts company is, even though it was still quite a small organisation, there was a board of very experienced people. And I could get my champion on the board or a couple of champions on the board for what I wanted to do. So I think that's the way it works as you get more senior, but sometimes at middle management you just don't have that opportunity. So I think as senior leaders we need to think about helping people get those sponsors, sponsoring people ourselves, but helping them get other sponsors. If we see someone, you know, that's a bit different, they might be different to us, but saying, well, but you're like my colleague in this business over here, why don't you meet with them? And just really sort of valuing that difference
help them build the network,
find a network that helps them.
I think that's really important. I remember working with you when you were at LCCC at that time. You know, we had some fun, didn't we? In the early days of forming something new, you really learn, don't you? I think that for me, that's another career platform that's been very useful. I'm thinking we should maybe go to some questions now. Thank you, Anna. Will you pick one out for us? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Duncan, and hi, Ruth. It's a really interesting conversation. I think we're all loving this. We've got about 20 minutes for questions. So everyone online, please do continue to put your questions in the Q&A for Ruth. The first question we had was around your comments on flexibility, Ruth. And someone has said that their own experience as a leader within a male-dominated industry is that there's this prevailing cultural pressure to be available 24/7, to be the first in the morning and the last to leave, and it's a really difficult challenge. And that this person said that they've got a work smart, not hard approach, but getting buy-in on that from other people is difficult. So do you have any positive suggestions, I guess, to companies really to create that culture where there is buy-in on that approach?
Yeah, I think actually this may not be the case all the time, but I think we slipped into a lot of out of hours chat in the CCSA when I first came in by accident, really, and we had to kind of pull it back and address it. So I think what you can do, you have to listen to people. So we have regular ways of working, meetings where we just talk about like the nuts and bolts of how we're working together and how we're using all the different forums to communicate are we sending too many of certain types of emails, or are we using the chat properly? And what we found was people were using the WhatsApp chat to send work stuff very late at night because that's what they needed for their work, but it only needed to go to 1 or 2 people. It didn't need to go to the whole team and things like that. So that the reason why, so we've got a thing of, because we work flexibly, of course, and this is the flip side. Some people who knock off at 2 and come back and work or they knock off at 3, sorry, to collect kids, they come back and work at, say, like 6 or 7, and then they work till 9 or whatever. So that those people were bugging the people that worked, 8 till 6 or whatever. So you've got this thing of, actually, we've all got to be quite mindful of each other's patterns. And I have a little thing at the bottom of my email that says, I work flexibly, so I may send emails out of hours. Yeah. Please ignore these until you are in your pattern. So, pick them up within your pattern, recognise I'm sending them in my pattern.
License the recipient. Yeah,
exactly. Now, obviously, if you're talking about somewhere where there is no flexible patterns, then the first thing to do is address that and get flexible working. The law says you can have it, so you can have it. So you have to have it, apply for it, ask for it, get other people to do the same so you're not alone, and get that set up. But once it's set up, it's then a case of saying, well, that might mean I might email someone at 10 p.m, but that's because I didn't start till late or I had something else. So I think it's that sort of really good communication about what we're doing. And if some people might have to be working all night on a deal, or they might have to be in early because they're media lead that day and they've got to be in at 6 for markets at 7 or whatever. But
basic respect.
Don't assume that everybody's. I suppose the point is sometimes we all assume everyone's in early because we've all got to be in early, and actually I would say maybe that is the case and your senior management are not in the 21st century, but it might just be an assumption, and so challenge that, ask management to send out some comms and make clear what is the situation.
And the world is so different.
It can be broken quite quickly overnight, but it creeps in really insidiously, actually, for no good reason.
Yeah, it does, and we've seen so many examples of it working much smoother. So this is, as you say, it's been 30 years ago.
That in some respects. Yeah. But it does worry me that things seem to be creeping back to normal with lots of evening events. I've noticed that, Duncan, I don't know about you. So it is a bit more, things do seem to be going back. And I think it's good to be in the office and be together as a team. We've enjoyed that, but we still only do that 2 days a week, and we do have a lot of people flexible hours. So I think pointing out businesses where they have got a lot of flexibility, I think that their competitors and so on, raising that as something that makes the employee value proposition less attractive, and it's making you harder to recruit and things like that. I think that's the only way really that you get boards to listen and senior management to listen on that.
I've got a question here. Oh. There's a question here. It may not be the next one in line, but it's the next one that popped up on my screen, and it's about. It says here, in your view, Ruth, what can someone like me, and that's a stereotypical white male middle manager, do to be an active ally and to support female colleagues and other colleagues that maybe bring some difference in? I think you've said some of these things already. Yeah.
I think it's about thinking about how to give them opportunities to showcase their work and shout about what they're doing. So making sure they're not so loaded that they don't have any time to invest in their development. Making sure that if there aren't suitable opportunities during their working hours or that they can attend, that you create some. But also, I think delegation. A lot. I mean, our UK director here is going to be my successor, and that came through a kind of quite concerted approach, I think, from me to say, as part of development discussions, would you ever like to do my job? So ask them, do you see yourself doing my job? How soon would you like to be able to do that?
Do you think you seeded or accelerated that? I mean, maybe you don't want to talk about the personal case, but
I think we were having those conversations as part of development, because you've got to look at where someone's going, and as I said before, you've almost got to start from the moment someone's joins your team, you start having those discussions about, this is a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beyond year project to get you from here to where you want to go. And you can go as slowly, as quickly as you like. How can I facilitate that for you? And where is it you're going next? And so always to see them just as you're their custodian for a short space of time as a manager. So I think all of that kind of attitude and just asking them what they need from you, I think would be amazing.
We've got a question here about the international scene. Be interested to know if you've worked or engaged with international partner countries on energy, and if so, does this involve sharing best practices, strategy, and comparing approaches taken? I don't know if that's a general question or a gender.
So I mean, when we were talking about the International Ministerial Conference, absolutely, that was, we had to liaise with 15 secretaries of state, so the departments. In fact, the International Steering Committee was much bigger than that. I think it had 21 countries on. And the only time it could meet, I think, was 12 noon on Friday, so that people in Saudi, people in Australia, and people in the US could all be on the same call. Really challenging working with people in all these different time zones, very different cultures, very different perceptions of things, and very different policy starting points. And we're all trying to agree and communicate at the end of that. So that was a really, really challenging period, but really, really rewarding. And I think I have, when I was at the City of London Corporation, we went to Qatar, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and again, cultural differences about how you can greet people and whether you can be in the room and lots of things like that. So you see that. I've had to deal with that throughout my career, but even in, to be honest, even in this country, being in number 10 for a meeting, I think there were only 2 women on a table of about 40 senior figures from the energy sector. So it's there all the time. But I really enjoyed international work, found it really rewarding. I think the harder it is to find the consensus, the more rewarding it is when you do. So I think, fantastic opportunity.
It's totally clear to me that you love energy. It's drawn you in, as it does, doesn't it?
Yes, it is quite addictive. But, it just, for me, it's that wanting to address climate change as quickly as possible for future generations. If we can't, energy is a big part of it. But at CCSA, industrial emissions that are not from burning fuels is also a massive part of it. So just really kind of broadening out from energy while I've been at CCSA has also been quite helpful. There's more difficult bits. There's transport as well. Aviation and shipping, they're huge. The way that we transport everything that we consume and deal with that. So
it's a massive part of energy, and it's totally global.
Carbon capture speaks to all of those. So it's been quite good to broaden from energy. But absolutely, energy remains key also.
Anna.
Yes, thanks, Duncan. So a question that's come through, I think it's probably related to what you were just talking about and how you're inspired by the energy sector and climate change. But is there a particular person in your past that has inspired you, not necessarily at work, but possibly at work? And when you find yourself stuck for inspiration, where do you go to, or who do you go to?
So I think a number of people I find really, really inspiring, particularly, and they are, some of them are men, but it was Sir David King, for example, just somebody I think who manages to convey very, very depressing, doomy type science with the utmost optimism and belief in humanity that we can overcome it. And we got him to our conference last year, and he was talking about 7.5 metre sea rises. And most people were thinking, oh, my house is gone. And ending his talk so positively about the opportunity for technology to really overcome and reverse some of this stuff. And that for me is just keeps me going. It's the reason why I can find the energy to get up in the morning, because it's not lost yet. We've got a chance to save ourselves, and I think so. That's been really, really important.
That sounds like taking inspiration. He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. Taking inspiration from him. But is there someone you'd go to for advice, or how do you deal with things that might be your current challenge, your challenge of the month?
Yeah. So what I've done at every stage of my career, I guess, as we were talking about mentors before, is like collected somebody who could help me. So I don't know whether I said, but when I was in DEC, my official mentor, if you like, it was like a casual thing, but was Hugh McNeil, who's Director of Renewables. So he was helping me with applications for promotions and things like that. And then he actually left and took a pathway into Trade Association, into Renewable UK as their CEO. We stayed in touch, and actually he didn't mentor me as actively at that point, I think, but I reconnected with him when I was thinking about coming here as well, because, you know,
and it might not be much, but a little bit of advice, a conversation.
Yes, and then again about the board, how to reform the board and make the board better, and how to go about that, how to even broach that with the board and so forth, and also about, you know, just how to improve the CCSA as an association. Also, though, peer-to-peer mentoring. So, Pinch Becker at Energy UK, you know, we were, you know, side by side in the industry and so forth. Worked with her quite closely when I was at DEC, when she was in, you know, in NGO, and then, you know, at LCCC when she was at RUK, and then suddenly, I think only a couple of months before me, she was in the CEO and I was the CEO of a trade association. So sharing kind of similar situations, again, how to work through the board,
very good.
You know, growing teams, restructuring teams, all that stuff. So I think you can, it's not, you know, it doesn't have to be someone who's already done something. It can be someone that's going through at the same time as you as well.
And lots and lots of insights in that. I think, you know, what you said at the beginning, you know, not my formal mentor. I think quite often this is how it is. It's something that seems to work, and you pick it up and it changes, and you drop it, and then you might pick it up again, and then. And
you just, if you stay in touch with it, it doesn't matter. You might think, oh, I haven't seen that person for ages. I recently got in touch with someone that had been involved in the setup of LCCC, but then didn't stay on. Just dropped them a line to see how they were, because I was thinking about something that I saw on LinkedIn they were working on. And people are I'm always happy when people from the past connect with me and go, do you remember me? We worked together on it. I love it. Everybody loves it. And it doesn't matter what level you are. So don't think that people are unapproachable. I mean, again, Jonathan Bareilly's someone that sort of went quite stratospheric quite quickly, right? But I had a really good working relationship with him, and I found him really inspiring. He's somebody that I worked for that actually had a really good vision. You know, he's happy for other people to work out how to implement it, which was what I was there to do, and that worked really well, that relationship. And I, you know, again, I think, you know, just different people for different things, but, you know, doesn't matter.
That's
how
what a network is, isn't it?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter how long you've left it.
Yeah. Very good. Anna, another question?
Yes, we've still got about another 10 minutes, so just to everyone online, do continue to put your questions in the Q&A if you have anything to ask Ruth. But one question we've just had through is there, and something probably that Duncan could contribute to as well, is what is one practice outside of hiring that you would recommend to put in place in an organisation, maybe some of the big corporates, that encourage a change in the culture and achieve more gender diversity?
Outside of hiring, because I mean, you've got to have people in the organisation if you want to promote them. But I think, I mean, it's difficult because obviously in the civil service, the way that you promote people is done quite well, I think. Having said that, I also found I did one interview actually where it was quite interesting. I think it was down to the final two for a director role, and one person came to me, one of the panel said to me after the interview, I actually thought you you were really strong, you were the stronger candidate, but you thought very differently to the incumbent who was on the panel, who said, no, that won't work. And it was, the question was about how you would deliver the next stage of this very important government policy in energy. It was, I can't say too much, you'll work out who it was, but actually, when you look back now, they've actually spent another 2 years trying to do it the way they were doing it at the time, and they're now doing it the way that I had said in my interview they ought to try doing it. So it was really weird looking back, because I realised that it's not just, as you say, recruiting the right people, but diverse people. But then when you look at how to promote, it comes back to this not promoting people that are the same. I'll have another one of those, please. It might actually be, especially if you're in the area, a challenging area which hasn't been working out, to go, let's try something really different. But that is taking risks. I think it needs support all the way to the top, but that, I think really feel like that's the key to it.
I think that's right. And you asked the question as hiring, and there's hiring in from outside the organisation, and then there's hiring internally.
Yeah, and promoting.
And I think, we are learning, and I can't claim that we know the answer to this, but I think some of the things that we're learning is that you need active sponsorship and curation activities in the company to make sure that people get the support they need. I think we've also learned that sometimes it's better to hang out for what you want, if that is something for difference, rather than the natural internal candidate. Let's hang out for a different solution. And I think another thing that we've learned, we've looked at what's coming in the energy transition, just a massive explosion of investment, of change, of growth, and actually we need to do more things differently. Our scale is going to be so much bigger.
Yeah.
And that's everything from projects to operations to policy to...
Yeah.
And if you're really growing, then you need to appeal. It's not so much the individual hiring decision, but just the general appeal of our industry to a whole new set of talent at all stages of their career. Yeah. And I think that general appeal is massively important, something we need to work on.
So I think it comes down back to this profile thing. Give your employees the opportunity to really showcase what they're doing, to talk about it, not just within the company, but externally, so that other people can see that is a pathway and that they can be attracted to also do that.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be happening more and more, that people championing what they're doing and that being visible. Outside of that, I think that's really the only way to sort of pull people up, I think. And
I think that's a superb. I think that's a superb final point.
Which is what this is doing,
isn't it?
So,
well, I hope so. I hope people have enjoyed that. It's been lovely talking to you, and I think you've shone a light on some really important things that to me they're universal. They're part of our industry and part of our organisations, and there's a lot of insight in there. I think thank you so much for coming on and doing it. Thank you everybody for listening. Anna?
Yes, thanks everyone for the great questions, and on behalf of Powerful Women, a huge thank you to you both, to Ruth and to Duncan, for giving your time today and for such a fascinating conversation. Was there anything else that you wanted to add, Duncan, or because I was just going to add for people to look for the recording on YouTube and to follow Powerful Women on LinkedIn to see other events that we've got coming up.
I think that's it. Maybe the one last thing was I think that what Ruth was just saying at the end there probably applies to all of us, no matter what role and level we're at. I think we can all play a part in that. I'll certainly take it on.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.